Man, if you know Andy and Jenny, you know how awesome that they are and how much influence and impact they have on people that are a part of our church, but just as much influence and impact on people throughout Northern Colorado. Like, we need more and more Andy and Jenny's, and that's how we're gonna win NOCO. So our vision as a church is to win Northern Colorado for Christ, and how we do that is by using all the different stories and experiences and gifts and talents that God has given so many people in our church to go out and make an influence in our circles of influence across this region. And we're a big enough church that if we're doing what Andy and Jenny do, how they disciple people, how they invest, how they selflessly give, man, no question God will use our church to win NOCO. We want to see more and more of that. I got an update for you on Burn the Ships. If you haven't been here for any of this, Burn the Ships is just the name of the initiative we have to win Northern Colorado for Christ. That's our vision as a church. That's where we're going. 2 updates. Number 1, right outside here, there is now a Burn the Ships wall that you can go see the most up-to-date information of what's going on there. If you want to grab one of the vision packets or commitment cards, there will be people out there that can answer any questions that you might have. That's going to be up there for the duration of this initiative. So stop by, check out what's going on at the wall. Second update is right now we are getting ready to go forward and start on replacing our roof in the next few weeks, which is, I'm super excited about that. I kid you not, a couple weeks ago when we had a downpour here, on this brick wall, just on the other side of this wall in the lobby, there were 4 waterfalls coming down that wall. Like, I'm not kidding. So I cannot wait to replace our roof. We need to do that before we renovate any of the rest of our campus, which is what we're going to be doing. We need to take care of our roof to protect whatever we renovate next. So the most common question is, okay, cool, Matt. Well, when are we going to start renovating the rest of the building? The answer to that, number 1, is we will go as fast as we as the church want to give. So when we have 70% of the money that it takes to renovate, that's when we will start, so that we don't have to start and stop, increase more costs that way. But once we start, we want to go. We will do that when we have enough money to do that. Right now, we have enough money to do the roof, so we're going to do that. So if you would like to be involved in that, if you're not already involved in Burn the Ships, this is your invitation to be a part of it. To see Northern Colorado won for Christ, a strategic need that we have that we get to do is we get to renovate our entire campus. So grab one of the vision cards, one of the commitment cards, check that stuff out there at the wall, ask any questions that you have, and man, I'm excited to see that roof get put up here in the next couple weeks. We'll give you more updates on that when we get there. Today, we are still in this series called Chasing Ghosts, and let me set up a scenario like this. Let's say that you're driving and nobody's in the car with you. You're alone. What are you listening to? How many of you are listening to music? You're picking music. Okay, right, and it's your music, not your spouse, not your kid's music, not that friend of yours that you love deeply, but they have a horrible, horrible taste in music, but you're picking your music, okay? How many of you are listening to podcasts? Yeah, I thought that was 9 o'clock was the same way. I thought there'd be more podcast people. That's what I'm listening to. Okay, what about talk radio? I have no idea if that's a thing anymore. Is that still a thing? A couple of you are saying yes. Okay, talk radio. How many of you have the choice, if it can just be silent, you're taking silence? Yes, there's some silence people, right? All right, now here's the thing. No matter what you pick, you are still choosing what you're listening to, and you're choosing what you're not listening to. And what you listen to matters. Let's keep driving. Let's say that while you're driving, somebody else grabs the steering wheel. You're driving, but somebody else has their hand on the wheel. It's kind of a scary proposition, isn't it? Now, my 10-year-old would be more than happy to grab the wheel if we're driving on I-70 through the Eisenhower Tunnel. Probably not a great idea, though. Even if it's an adult, it's probably not a great idea for you to let somebody else grab the wheel, because at any moment, they can do something that could have a serious impact on your life. They might turn the car in a direction that you have no idea about. They might have lied about their driving record. Whenever someone else grabs the wheel, it might be your car, you might be in the driver's seat, but you're not in control anymore. It's kind of a vulnerable spot to be in. Now, let's turn that into a metaphor. Let's just say that the car is your life. You're gonna be really careful and cautious with who you allow to put their hands on the steering wheel, are you not? And maybe you're thinking, well, Matt, that's just dumb. I'm not gonna let anything put their hands on the wheel. Maybe so, that might be true. But regardless, there are other hands on the steering wheel. And there's probably far more than we can imagine or even come up with. Other hands that are trying to get on your wheel. Let me say it this way. In this metaphor, the hands are voices. And a voice does have control of the steering wheel of your life. The question is, do you know what voice it is? And maybe that sounds a little bit strong at first, but I promise you that it's not. And maybe you're really resistant to this idea and thinking again, like, no, nobody's putting their hands on my steering wheel. If that's you, then there's probably more than one voice that has a strong grip on your steering wheel. You just might not be able to see what it is yet. A voice can have profound influence on the direction your life goes. So many different voices that want to grab hold of the steering wheel of your life. Again, the question is, do you know what that voice is? And we could talk all day long about external voices. External voices meaning like what you listen to on the radio, what you're listening to in your car, what social media says, what your friends talk about. There's all kinds of external voices that can have profound influence, either good or bad, profound influence on the direction your life goes. But what about the more subtle voices? I don't want to talk about the external ones. It's easy to think about what you see in the media or what you hear on social media or what your friends talk about. Forget that for a second. What about the much more subtle voices that can actually be even more influential? Voices that can cause you to start chasing ghosts and forget God entirely. I mean, think about this. If God spoke creation into existence, if he spoke it into existence, John 1:1 says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. If God has given us his word, if he still speaks through his word and through his spirit, that means God's voice is the most powerful voice in the world, and it's not even close. You would think that we would all want to listen to that voice. Like, I want to listen to the voice that spoke creation into existence. I want to listen to the voice that created mankind in his image. I want to listen to the voice that has all of the hidden treasures of wisdom and knowledge. You would think that we would all want to listen to that voice. But because God's voice is the most powerful and most important voice in the world, there are all kinds of other voices that are flooding your world trying to create white noise or confuse you or manipulate you or distract you. Voices that are trying to be a counterfeit to God's voice. So go back to that original question. What voices are trying to grab a hold of the steering wheel? There are multiple spots in the Bible that talk about what you're listening to. I think there's a great story in Numbers 13 and Numbers 14 that actually highlights a bunch of these subtle voices that try to be a counterfeit to God's voice. It's not the obvious ones that we think about, but also there's a message behind each one of these subtle voices. So let me set up the story. If you were here last week, God has just led you and the Israelites out of 400 years of slavery in Egypt. You watched God part the Red Sea. You watched the Egyptian army get wiped out in a moment. You see God lead you out of Egypt with a pillar of cloud during the day and this massive blazing fire at night that moves. God leads you and the rest of the Israelites to Mount Sinai where he gives Moses the 10 Commandments. And then while you're there, you and the rest of the Israelites get really, really impatient. So you decide to make a golden calf by melting down all of your jewelry. Then you guys start worshiping this metal cow and say, this is the God that led us out of Egypt. Kind of a dumb moment in Israel's history, not a highlight. That was all last week. We hit on that last week. Now fast forward the story to Numbers 13. God gives you grace. There's still some hiccups. God gives you grace and leads you all the way to the southern border of the Promised Land. He leads you to the border of Canaan. And then God tells Moses, he says, oh, here's what I want you to do. Moses, grab 12 different guys, a leader from each of the 12 tribes of Israel, and I want you to send them into the Promised Land, and I want you to spy out the land. So Moses does. He does exactly what God says. He gets 12 different guys, and he says, here's your mission. You're going to go into the Promised Land, and you're going to spy out the land, you're going to spy out the people. I want you to see what it's like there. See how many people are there, who they are, how strong they are, what their numbers are like, what their cities are like. Then check out the land. Is it good land? Is it good for farming? See what we're dealing with here. And then when you come back, make sure you bring some of the fruit back with you so we can check it out. I mean, kind of an awesome assignment if you think about it. Like, you get to go home and say, honey, I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm kind of a big deal because I just got asked by God and by Moses to be Jason Bourne. Like, I'm going to go be a spy for a little while, so I'll see you later. Like, that would be awesome, right? Like to get picked to go spy out the land? I mean, you've already seen God's power with your own eyes. You saw God destroy the Egyptian empire with plagues. You see him part the Red Sea. You walk across the dry ground through the Red Sea with your own feet. And then you watch as the Egyptian army chases you down, trying to kill you. You see God say, no, we're not going to do that, and collapses the walls of water on top of the Egyptian army, immediately wiping out the greatest military at that point in history. Then God continues to lead you through the desert. There's this blazing fire at night that moves. Where it goes, you go. Like, it's pretty awesome. You're seeing this happen. Now, God has led you to the land that he promised you and his people, and he's saying, I want you to go spy it out. That's a cool assignment. I would say yes to that. I think most of us would say, I'm down, this is gonna be cool. And Moses says, hey guys, when you go spy it out, you have nothing to be afraid of. Don't be afraid. And you would think that would be kind of understood at that point. If God has already done all this stuff to protect us and provide and make good on his promises, what do you have to be afraid of? So these guys go. They go into the promised land. They go all over Canaan. For 40 days they're there. They're spying out their land. They're checking out the people that are there. And they do exactly what Moses said. They cut down one single cluster of grapes from a branch. One single cluster of grapes. And it has to be carried on a pole by two grown men as they bring it back. That's how big the grapes were. Like nuclear grapes. Seriously, think about it. Two grown men carrying one cluster of grapes on a pole. It's like the grapes were softballs. So they come back to the people, they come back to Moses after being gone for 40 days. They bring the fruit, they show the fruit to the people, and they tell them, guys, not gonna lie, the land's pretty awesome. It's beautiful. If you've been to Israel, you know that it's beautiful. It's beautiful, and it actually is exactly what God said it is. It is a land flowing with milk and honey, and the people are fired up. They're like, this is awesome. Like, did you see those grapes? Like, that's incredible. And it is the land that God promised. It is a land flowing with milk and honey. God is good. Like, he's taking us exactly to what he said he was going to take us. But then 10 of those spies say, hey, pump the brakes, guys. Hold up. Like, don't get too excited yet. The people living there are powerful, and their towns are large and fortified. We saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. Verse 30, but Caleb tried to quiet the people as they stood before Moses. Hey, let's go at once and take the land. I love Caleb. Let's go at once and take the land. We can certainly conquer it. But the other men who had explored the land with him disagreed. We can't go up against them. What are you talking about, Caleb? They're stronger than we are. So they spread this bad report about the land among the Israelites. The land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. All the people we saw were huge. We even saw the giants there, the descendants of Anak. Next to them, we seemed like grasshoppers. And that's what they thought about us too. Those are two very conflicting messages. But it's not done yet. Numbers 14, verse 1. Then the whole community began weeping aloud, and they cried all night. Their voices rose in a great chorus of protest against Moses and Aaron. If only we had died in Egypt or even here in the wilderness, they complained. Why is the Lord taking us to this country only to have us die in battle? Our wives and our little ones will be carried off as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to return to Egypt? Then they plotted among themselves. Hey, okay, let's just choose a new leader and go back to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell face down on the ground before the whole community of Israel. Two of the men who had explored the land, Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of, I can't pronounce his name, tore their clothing. They said to all the people of Israel, the land that we traveled through and explored is a wonderful land. And if the Lord is pleased with us, he will bring us safely into the land and give it to us. It is a rich land flowing with milk and honey. Do not rebel against the Lord and do not be afraid of the people of that land. They are only helpless prey to us. They have no protection. But the Lord is with us, so don't be afraid of them. But the whole community began to talk about stoning Joshua and Caleb. 10 voices versus 2. 10 voices trying to dissuade people from following God. 10 voices trying to get people to forget what God had already done. And God already made good on his promises, so why would he not make good on the promised land? God had already taken care of the greatest military threat at that point in history, the Egyptian army, and he took care of it in a moment. So why couldn't he take care of these threats? But voices can be very, very influential. The people ended up listening to the 10 instead of the 2. So here's the truth. Here's what you and I have to remember. The voices you listen to will have consequences, good or bad. Unfortunately, the people followed the wrong ones, and the consequences ended up being pretty severe. God says to all the people, he says, okay, you want to listen to these 10 guys that are saying the exact opposite of what I've been telling you all along. If you want to listen to them and if you want to keep complaining, fine, you're not going into the promised land. You're not going to see it. In fact, like you said, you're going to die out here in the wilderness. What's going to happen is you're going to wander around out here in the desert for 40 years. Once this entire generation has died off, then I'm going to lead your children into the promised land like I promised you. And this is all coming because you've been unfaithful. That's tough. 10 voices ended up persuading roughly 2 million people to go in the wrong direction. The voices you listen to matter. And the voices you listen to can cost you greatly. It could cost you fruit. There were clusters of grapes the size of softballs. They had to be carried by grown men. Incredible fruit. So if you listen to the wrong voices, what fruit might it cost you? It's not going to be just grapes. Grapes are not the only thing that grow in Israel. There's all kinds of fruit that grows in Israel. They saw the grapes. They didn't even know about all the other fruit that they were going to miss out on. If you listen to the wrong voices, you're going to miss out on fruit that you know about and also fruit that you don't know about. That fruit could be legacy, influence, impact. Could be satisfaction, joy, personal growth, opportunities. You will miss out on all kinds of fruit that you know about and that you don't know about if you listen to the wrong voice. It's also going to cost you time. They lost 40 years. 40 years wandering around in the desert. I mean, what a waste. Think about how much could actually be accomplished in 40 years. But on top of that, think about the compound interest that will come with 40 years. I mean, not only did they lose 4 decades, they lost 4 decades of production, growth, and compound interest. You will miss out on all kinds of things if you lose time, all from listening to the wrong voice. And they lost an entire generation. An entire generation gone. Are we cool with losing an entire generation because we don't want to listen to God's voice? And Jesus was clear. He said the gates of hell cannot prevail against the church, meaning the Big C church, the global church. The church isn't going away. No matter what, the church is not going away. I don't care what you hear about decline or persecution. In fact, whenever there's persecution, the church just grows. We have 2,000 years of history to see that. The church isn't going away. But here's what's also true. The church is always one generation away from being completely irrelevant in any certain geographical area. The church could be thriving in one part of the world, but doing nothing in another simply because we're not listening to his voice. So which one do we want to choose? Do we want to lose an entire generation or do we want to take on nuclear grapes? It all comes down to listening to God's voice. The wrong voices will always encourage you to start chasing ghosts instead of trusting God. 10 guys took roughly 2 million people in the wrong direction. Instead of going forward, they retreated. Instead of trusting God, they forgot. Instead of inheriting a promise, they lost 4 decades. That's how powerful voices can be. That's how powerful your voice can be. Are you being careful with your own voice? James 3:5 says that the tongue is a small thing that gives grand speeches, and a tiny spark can ignite an entire forest on fire. That's dangerous. Your voice has far more influence than you think that it does. Far more. You can either build up or you can burn stuff down. Blessing, the word blessing or blessed, if you break down the etymology of that word, blessing simply means to speak well of. So when you speak well of someone, either to their face or behind their back, you are blessing them. A curse is the exact opposite. It is speaking poorly of someone. It's tearing that person down. Why would you want to put curses out in the world when you can speak blessing over people and over things? You get that choice. You can either speak blessings or curses. You can either build up or you can burn stuff down. You can have a voice like Caleb. Caleb's voice is pretty awesome. His voice gave strength and courage to people. It called people to be faithful and to trust God and to have peace. Or your voice could be like one of the 10 and tell people to forget God. Forget what he says, forget what he's already done. Like, which one do you want to choose? The voices that you listen to are going to tell you what to trust. So do you know what you're really listening to, and do you know what they're telling you to trust? Jesus talks about this in John 10. He's actually talking about himself. He says the gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep recognize his voice. They recognize Jesus' voice, and they come to him. He calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. After he has gathered his own flock, he walks ahead of them, and they follow him because they know his voice. They won't follow a stranger. They will run from a stranger because they don't know his voice. If you recognize Jesus' voice, you'll know him, and if you know him, you can follow him. Psalm 85:8 says this, I listen carefully to what the Lord is saying. If you remember anything from today, remember that. I listen carefully to what the Lord is saying, for he speaks peace to his faithful people, but let them not return to their foolish ways. If you don't know Jesus' voice, if you don't recognize it, then it's a whole lot easier to fall for all the counterfeit voices that are trying to have your ear right now and take you in the wrong direction. Numbers 13 and Numbers 14, there are multiple subtle voices that are highlighted in that story. Counterfeit voices to God's voice. And all of these voices are some that we have dealt with before, or you're dealing with now, or you will deal with in the future. Not only what they say, but what's the message behind what they're saying? All of us are going to deal with these subtle voices. Which one are you struggling with? Maybe is it the voice of opposition? I mean, the spies come back and they said, we can't go up against these guys. They're way too strong for us. They're bigger than we are. Their cities are forts. We can't touch them. All they heard was opposition. Now, you're going to face opposition in life. That's reality. You're even going to face more of it if you follow Jesus. But what the voice of opposition will do is it will try to make you feel like you're weak. It will make you try to feel like you're alone. So then you go ahead and turn back. Opposition is always meant for you to turn back. Instead, God's voice is the voice of power and strength and security. God has all of authority and he wins. Jesus wins. There is no opposition that can stand against God and his word. So why would we ever listen to the voice of opposition? But maybe that's all you're hearing right now. Maybe the only thing in your ears right now is the opposition that you're going to face later today or tomorrow or next week, and you just can't get past it. All opposition wants you to do, the message that it's going to tell you is, hey, just turn back. Just turn back. Or maybe you're wrestling with fear, the voice of fear. They said, if we go in there, we're going to die. And if we go in there, it's going to be even worse for our wives and for our kids. So the 10 start spreading this bad news around all of the people, and all the people get super terrified. They're freaking out. They're all scared. Well, apparently God's proven power wasn't enough. They just kept focusing on what they were afraid of, because that's exactly how fear works. What fear will do is it will get you to focus on the object of your fear instead of God's proven power. Fear will cause you to forget who God is, what he's done, and it will cause you to forget that you really have nothing to be afraid of. 2 Timothy 1 says this, God did not give us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power and love and self-control. If we have that, we have nothing to be afraid of. But fear is going to constantly try to get in your ear. You're going to hear bad news over and over again. Is it just me, or do I feel like I hear bad news multiple times every day? Does anybody else feel that way? Bad news is often the whisper of fear. But remember this, no matter what bad news you hear, can't touch the good news that you have. The good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ, is the greatest message of all time for all people. It is the message that has the power to save, to redeem, to restore, to transform. It is the power, it is the message of eternal life. So no matter what bad news you hear, that's just an attempt to make you afraid so you forget about the good news that you have, that you possess. So don't listen to the voice of fear. Or maybe you're struggling with the voice of comparison. The 10 spies said, hey, we seem like grasshoppers compared to these guys. Well, who cares what you seem like compared to anybody else? Who cares? Don't compare yourself to other people. If you compare yourself to other people, then you're going to forget who God made you to be and where he's calling you to be faithful at. When you compare yourself to other people, that takes the focuses off of God and it puts it on you. It's a form of pride. And it could go either way. You could be comparing yourself to other people saying, hey, I'm better than them because of X, Y, and Z. I hope you're not that arrogant. That's pride. But it also goes the other way too. You could be comparing yourself to other people saying, well, here's all the things that I'm lacking because of them. Here's what I don't have compared to them. Here's how I'm not as good as them. That's another form of pride because it just makes it all about you. Man, our culture is built on comparison. You're going to come in contact with it all of the time. But don't play that game because it's a dead end. And I've told you this before. Comparison is self-inflicted discouragement. That's all comparison is. If you want to be discouraged, go ahead and compare yourself. And the reason why I can tell you this is because this is the voice out of the whole list that I struggle with the most. You can ask my wife. Comparison is the one I wrestle with the most. I hope it's not, I compare myself to other people and think I'm better than them. I don't think it's that. I think she would absolutely call me on that. But what I do is I compare myself to somebody else and see all the things that are lacking in me compared to that person. Well, I'm not as gifted as that person. I'm not as strong as them. I'm not doing as well as them. I compare myself to other people. I hate this about myself, but I do it. I listen to that voice of comparison and then I get discouraged every single time. Comparison is self-inflicted discouragement. Don't compare yourself. Don't listen to that voice. Or maybe it's complaining, the voice of complaining. The Israelites were really, really good at complaining. Like you read throughout the Old Testament, they did that over and over and over again. There was a pattern. And the reason there's a pattern to complaining is because complaining is always contagious. It's always contagious. Now, you and I might say this, like, hey, I'm not going to complain, and it wouldn't help if I did because nobody's going to listen, right? There's some truth to that, and that's actually wise to not do that. But part of that's also off. Because when you do complain, it gives license to other people to complain also. The only thing that complaining will do is it will rob you of joy and cause you to forget all that God has already given you. If you remember from a couple weeks ago, there's a direct connection in your brain between your memory and gratitude. So if you want to remember God, say thank you. Complaining is the exact opposite of gratitude. The exact opposite of gratitude. Complaining causes you to forget everything that God has already done. Let me ask you a question. If you've ever been around someone who complains a lot, do you feel better about yourself after you've been with that person? The answer is no. No, you do not, right? Now let's get real honest. If you're around someone who complains a lot, do you find yourself complaining a lot easier after you've been with that person? Yes, the answer is yes, because complaining is contagious. How about this? Do you ever feel closer to God and at peace while you're complaining? No, you do not. Man, it just disconnects you from God. It stirs up discouragement, and then complaining will go down into bitterness. Like maybe that's the voice that you're struggling with right now. Maybe bitterness is in your ears. And they were bitter. The Israelites are like, it would be better for us to go back to Egypt and be slaves. Really? It would be better for us to die right here in the desert. It would be better for us to go back to Egypt and die there than go into the promised land. Really? I mean, that sounds insane to hear that. But that's exactly what bitterness does. Bitterness will take insanity and make it look like logic in your mind. Bitterness will distract you. It will take you away from God, cause you to forget God. And then what bitterness always does is it makes it seem like the worst things in life are actually better than following God's plans and God's purposes. And then all of those voices lead to the last one, which is the voice of accusation. They start accusing Moses and Aaron. What did you do to us? They start accusing and going after Caleb and Joshua. They're like, hey, let's stone those guys to death. They even start accusing God. What did you do to us, God? Why have you done this to us? Done what? Make good on my promises? Like provide for you, protect you? Like do what? There will always be voices of accusations coming into your ear and at you. One of the names for Satan in Scripture is the accuser. And he is very, very good at it. He will constantly try to accuse you, to discourage you, to get you to walk away, to bail on God, to forget. He will try to accuse you saying that what you've done is who you are. What you've done is not who you are. What Jesus did for you, that's who you are. It's a counterfeit to the gospel. Satan is going to accuse you and try to get you to think that, oh, God has forgotten you because of what you've done, so in return, then you'll forget God. That's his play. But if your faith and trust is in Jesus, there is no accusation against you that can remove you from the promise of salvation. If your faith and trust is in Jesus, there's no accusation that can remove you from the promise of God's love. If your faith and trust is in Jesus, if you're following Christ, there is no accusation that can be made against you that will remove you from the promise of transformation as you follow Christ. You may not be able to control what you hear, but you are able to control what you listen to. So remember, you get to choose what you listen to. Do not listen, please. Do not listen to the voice of opposition or fear. Do not listen to the voice of discouragement or complaining. Do not listen to the voice of bitterness, and do not listen to the accuser. You are listening to those voices if you continue to allow them to have residence in your ears. You're listening to those voices if you continue to entertain them. You're listening to those voices if you start to believe them. You're listening to those voices if you act on them. You're listening to those voices if you speak them to someone else. Don't do that. Like, don't spread that fire. Proverbs 26:20 says, a fire goes out without wood, and without a whisper, quarreling ceases. That proverb is talking specifically about gossip and slander, but the principle of it applies broadly. A fire goes out when it doesn't have wood. Don't give wood to the wrong fires. If you're listening to the wrong voices, you're just letting those fires keep on burning. A fire goes out when it doesn't have fuel. So how do you stop listening to the wrong voices, the voices that want to take you in the wrong direction, and how do you actually start listening to the right ones, listen to God's voice? First, be quiet. Be quiet. Quiet's a spiritual discipline. And it's hard in a very busy and loud world, is it not? Slow down. Be quiet. God often speaks in a whisper. It's not loud. And if everything around you is loud, it gets really, really difficult to listen to a quiet whisper. Slow down. Be quiet. If you want to remember God, say thank you. If you want to remember God, worship him. If you want to remember God, slow down, be quiet, and listen to him. It takes discipline to be quiet. But it's a gift. It's a big gift. If you want to listen to his voice, if you want to hear his voice, that also takes discernment. It takes a lot of discernment. How do I discern if this is God's voice or if this is something else? Well, the way you grow in discernment to recognize his voice is first you act on when you hear him speak. Be faithful when he speaks. Then also get in that. This is God's word. And I had a friend of mine say to me once, he's like, man, I don't ever hear God speaking to me at all. And I asked him, just straight up, hey, how often do you read the word? He goes, well, I don't. Well, that's why you don't hear him. It's not just this mystical experience where you hear God speaking. And I feel like God's speaking directly to my heart. That almost always comes when I'm in this. Sometimes it's hard too, right? I don't know if you know this, but there's parts of the Bible that are really confusing. Some of it's hard to understand, right? But something that I pray every single morning when I'm in the Word, and I pray this over you. I actually prayed this over you today. One, that you would have a hunger for God's Word, but here's what I pray. God, help me understand what I'm about to read. Will you speak to me through your word? Let me see and let me understand it. Would you write your word on my mind and my heart? He answers that all the time. I may not hear it right in the moment, but I'll tell you what, down the road, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, I hear it now. I hear you, Lord. All that does is increase your faith. All that does is fire you up more. So be in the word. Be in community also. This will help with discernment. Following Jesus is not a single player sport. Not at all. This is a team. We're in community together. We're a family. Get around other voices that are trying to listen to his voice too. Makes it a whole lot easier. They can use their discernment for you too. Hey, Matt, you're listening to the wrong voice. No, that's not God speaking to you. That's fear. No, you're listening to comparison again. Matt, stop doing that. Get into community too. Helps you discern God's voice. and filter out all the stuff you don't need to be listening to, and keep remembering. If you remember what God did yesterday, it becomes a lot easier to hear his voice today. Oh yeah, I remember what God did and what he said. This is his voice right now speaking to me. Or no, this isn't God's voice. This is the voice of accusation or fear or discouragement. Remember, you get to choose what you're listening to. You get to choose what has its hands on your wheel. Slow down. Be quiet so that you can remember God and follow his voice. Let me pray. Jesus, thank you for being a God who speaks. You've spoke throughout creation. You've spoke throughout history. You speak to us in your word. You speak to us in your spirit. Father, I pray that you would give us ears to hear, that we would be able to quiet ourselves down, that we'd be able to slow down so we could hear your gentle whisper and know what we ought to do, that we wouldn't go to the right or to the left, but we would stay following you. Give us the courage to follow you no matter what kind of opposition that we face or what we're afraid of or how we compare ourselves. I pray that you would just help us not to do that. Whenever the voice of opposition or fear or comparison or discouragement or bitterness or complaining or whenever the accuser speaks in our ear, that we would know it and we wouldn't listen to it. We would hear it, but we would block it. That we would hear your whisper. Father, we want to be a church where you speak and you speak loudly. Give us the ears to hear and the courage to follow. We want to. It's in Jesus' name, amen.